With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Chaf Dalid. We left off on Daf Chaf Dalid, Amid Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the Amid. We're going to learn regarding the mentioning of Chanukah in Birchas Hamazon. We're going to learn about mentioning Rosh Chodesh, Ya'aleh V'Yavai in Birchas Hamazon. We're going to question whether we say Al Hanisim during Musaf on Chanukah. Don't forget, Chanukah is not a yontif that has Musaf because of it being Chanukah, but you have Shabbos Chanukah, you have Rosh Chodesh Chanukah. For Shabbos you say Musaf, for Rosh Chodesh you say Musaf. Do we then add the Al Hanisim, and do we mention yontif in the abridged repetition of the Friday night Shabbos is Shmoina Esrei? Right, the Baal Tefillah says, "Veistach Magin Avos, Kain Shemaim Va'aretz, Magin Avos." So, do we add there also a mention of Yom Tov, or do we only conclude with Mekadesh HaShabbos? And that's going to be linked in part to the question whether Tfilas Arvis is Chayva, or as we have in Brachas Chav Zayin, whether Tfilas Arvis is Rishus, and much, much more. Chavra, let us start Chav Daled Amid Aleph. Nachamal 4 lines from the top of the Amid by the 2 dots. Iboy Elohu. Says the Gemara, in other words, when we learned on Daf Chaf Aleph, Amid Beis, my Chanukah the Tana Rabbanan, and the Braisa concluded that we make a mention of Chanukah both by saying Halal and in Hoida'a. Hoida'a means in the Shmoina Esrei. Question is, do we also mention it in Birchas Hamazon? And as Rashi writes in the top, Bit Fila, the top Rashi in the Amid, Pshitolon, Shaharei la Halal ula Hoida'a, Nikva'u kida Amrin an la'el. But what about in Birchas Hamazon? What's the 2 sides of the question? On one hand, keeping the Midrabanan who, since the whole Yom Tov of Chanukah is Midrabanan, so Yoloi Matkirinon, what the Gemara is trying to say in between the lines is when it comes to the mentioning of biblical holidays like Yom Tov, there is no doubt that we mention them in Birchas Hamazon, in Ya'aleh V'Yavai. But here, it's a Yom Tov only Midrabanan. Oy Dilma, the other hand, will be because of the concept of Pirsum and Nisa, it's only Midrabanan, but still, Matkirinon, we should make mention. So Amar Rava, Amar Rav Schreira, Amar Rav Huna, that that you are not obligated to mention what we call the Al Hanisim in Noid Locha. But if you do make mention of it, then Maskir Bohaida, then you have to make mention of Al Hanisim in the Noid Locha, in the second of the 4 right now brachas and Birchas Hamazon. In other words, and not in, let's say, not in Binyan Yerushalayim, because it's not a supplication, it's Halal and Hoida'a. So it fits, verstehst, in the bracha that begins with the words Noid Locha. Says the Gemara Rafuna about Yehuda Ikla Lebei Rava. He once visited the house of Rava. And Savar at Kurebe Boine Yerushalayim. He thought he's going to make mention of Al Hanisim as we do by Ya'aleh V'Yavai, as we make mention of Yom Tovim in the bracha of Boinei Yerushalayim. So Amar Lahu Rav Sheshes, no, that it has to be mentioned Kit Tfilah, just like in Tfilah it's mentioned B'Hoida'am. Right? We don't mention Al Hanisim like we mention Ya'aleh V'Yavai. Ya'aleh V'Yavai is like I mentioned in the saying, but Al Hanisim is mentioned in Moedem Anachnu Lach, because that's connected to a thanksgiving. It's not a supplication. It's a thank you. So after Birchas Hamazon, if you make mention, you must make mention b'hoidah. Furthermore, on the same topic, so they further asked, now, as we mentioned before, biblical Yom Tovim for sure are mentioned in Birchas Hamazon. Rosh Chodesh is a biblical Yom Tov. The Torah speaks about Rosh Chodesh. So in Tim Soleimer b'Chanukah derabbanan leitzarich. Exactly. So therefore, Rosh Chodesh, which is a doiraisa, so you should be obligated to make mention of it in the Birchas Hamazon, or it's taken midoiraisa, but it's not on the same level of a Yom Tov. How is it not on the same level? There's no prohibition of doing work. So therefore, maybe loy maskedin, and here we have a machlokes. So Rav says you are obligated to make mention of it. Rab Chanina Amar eina masked. Says the Gemara Amar Rab Zreika, nekoy de Rav miyaska. You have to follow the sheet of Rav that says yes, masked. Why? Because the koy Rabbi Oishia kavosei. Because Rabbi Oishia, as always, he was the famous compiler of Braisas. He found a Braisa. Perhaps when they were arguing, they didn't yet know of the Braisa. In the Braisa, we see like Rav, the Tani Rabbi Oishia. And this was his Braisa. Yomim sheyesh bahen karban musaf. Any day that comes along with a karban musaf, for example, Rosh Chodesh, Choyloi Shol Moed. Then says the Braisa, by all of the tefillas, Arvis, Shachris, Umincha, when you are mispalal Shmoina Esrei, you should va'omer me'ein ha'mo'ura ba'avoid. Avoid does it say? You should make mention, clear, of Rosh Chodesh. You should make mention of the Yom Tov during Chol HaMoed in the Ritzei Tefillah of Shmoina Esrei. Ve'im lo yamar, and furthermore, it's not only something that has to be done lechatchila, but it's ma'akev. Ve'im lo yamar machzir noisi, with all of the pratim that we're not going to get into right now. You have to go back to the beginning. Do you go back to Ritzei? And by the way, there's one nuance over here, that the only time we don't repeat the Shmoina Esrei is Ma'ariv Rosh Chodesh. It's good to remember that. Ma'ariv Chol HaMoed, if a person forgets Yalav Yovi, they're mechuyev to repeat the Shmoina Esrei again.
Isn't it just one day?
It's nothing to do with 1 day or 2 days. It's to do with the fact that they were not mekadosh the Chodesh at night. The Gemara speaks about it. We have to say Yalav Yovi by Ma'ariv, but if we forgot, the Machzir Noisei doesn't go to Ma'ariv Rosh Chodesh. Furthermore, says the Braisa, ve'ein bahen kedusha ala kois. Right? Kiddush is only Shabbos and Yom Tov. Kiddush is not a Chol HaMoed. Kiddush is not a Rosh Chodesh. V'yesh bahen haskara bebirchas hamazon. That's the topic that we're talking about. And when you bench, yes, you have to make mention of the fact that it is Rosh Chodesh. Again, this is like Rav. Weiter says the Braisa, Yomim she'ein behem karban musaf, days that don't have in it a karban musaf. For example, Sheni v'chamishi, right? Mondays and Thursdays. In the parentheses, there's another Sheni. Why would you even think Mondays and Thursdays? The Gemara is going to ask that in a moment. We're going to make a emendation. First, it says Mondays and Thursdays. The Girsa now is and on fast days and on Ma'amadays. We're going to learn, just like the Kohanim and the Levium were divided into Mishmarais, the Yisraelim, really, when I bring a carbon, it's definitely ideal for me to be there. It's not ma'akev in many cases. I can send it through a shliach, but it's important for me to be there. Since Karbanis Tzibur are being brought on behalf of all the Yidden, so theoretically, all the Yidden have to be there. It's not shaykh for all the Jews to be the whole time in the Beis HaMikdash, so we designated representatives. And these were special people. We learned a lot of pratim and tainas. Some of them actually went to the Beis HaMikdash. Many of them were representatives, but they stayed in their cities. If you remember, and they made big gatherings and they had special tefillos. And not only that, there's many pratim. During when the people that were the representatives of everyone else, the ones who stayed home, would gather and dav and make special tefillos in the city, in the streets, and they would fast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. There we spoke about why you don't fast on Sunday. The Gemara in Tainis, you don't fast on Friday. So no, it's during these fast days. Now, before the Braisa goes on, the Gemara interrupts. And the Gemara Taka doesn't understand. Why are you B'chlal mentioning Mondays and Thursdays? You can mention Stama Yom Choil. Sunday, Monday, what's Sheni v'Chamishi, Ma'av Detayu? Why are they being, sort of say, singled out? So the Gemara says, no, you're reading it wrong. He means the Sheni and the Chamishi and the Sheni of tiny yois when there is a drought. So there's a whole series of fast days that are imposed on the community, again, as we will learn in Masechtas Tainis. And when they are imposed, it's imposed not day after day after day after day, but it's called Bahab, Monday, Thursday, Monday. By the way, there were many series of them. Sometimes there is a series of 7. So it's Monday, Thursday, until you get to 7. Or my Mamadais, like we just mentioned, my Mamadais was, again, Monday through Thursday without a break. They fasted during the daytime of the day. They broke the fast ways at night. The point is that Braisa is now speaking about special fast days. There, since there is no Musaf, says the Braisa, Arvis, Shachris, Umincha, Mispalal, Shmoine Esrei. And, excuse me, and mention is made concerning the fast in the bracha of Shemei Tefillah, right? By a fast day, what do we say? Until today, we say Anenu. Where do we put Anenu? In Shemei Tefillah. However, unlike Yalav Yavai that we just mentioned, even post facto is essential. You have to machzir and you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. The Anenu is not so. If we're going to go with the parentheses and we don't make Kiddush, and the Ein Bahen Haskada B'Birchas HaMazon. When there's an Anenu, there's no mention regarding the affliction during Birchas HaMazon. People are going to ask, what are you talking about? It's a fast day. No. These are not fast days like Yom Kippur. These are not fast days like Tisha B'Av. These are fast days that one lichatchila, we eat night preceding the fast day, but it's a day of fast. So you would think, make mention, we don't. Bottom line is that we see amongst the many dinim in this brayso, like Rav, that maskir, which is exactly the way we do it. Furthermore, they asked in the yeshiva, this is such a practical topic. It's a machaya. Mahu lahaskir shel Chanukah b'musafim. You see, Chanukah, people should remember, it's a longer davening. We say Hallel, we have Kriyas HaTorah. There was no musaf that comes with Chanukah. Musaf will be said on Chanukah when it's Shabbos Chanukah. Chanukah always has in it Rosh Chodesh. Now, interestingly, Cheshvan and Kislev are the 2 months that even though we have a fixed calendar, it's not fixed how many days Rosh Chodesh. Sometimes there's going to be a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. Sometimes there's going to be a 1-day Rosh Chodesh. But whenever there's Rosh Chodesh, you have Musaf. So the question is, do we say Al Hanisim in the Musaf that happens to be on Chanukah? Why? Yeah, why not? This is very, very, very easy to get the two sides of this debate. On one hand, you can argue, even the late Bay Musaf B'didei, Chanukah doesn't demand Musaf. There isn't a carbon Musaf on Chanukah. Of course not. Of course not, because you can't bring Kachim Lazara. Any rabbinic holiday cannot come with a obligated carbon. A person can bring any day they want. If it's not a Yom Tov, they can bring an Oila, you can bring a Shlamim. So, but there is no Musaf. Like on Purim, there is no Musaf. So loimat kirinon, you're davening Musaf. Who cares? You're not davening Musaf because it's Chanukah. You're davening Musaf because it's Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh doesn't have an Al Hanisim. You're davening Musaf because it's Shabbos. Shabbos, we don't say Al Hanisim. Just because it happens to be on Chanukah, it's not a tefillah connected to Chanukah. Oy Dilma. No. That Yoim Hu Shechayev Ba'arba Tfilos. Yovaldik, the way you look at it, that this now that there is Musaf, it's Chanukah. You're mechuyev on that day, Rosh Chodesh or Shabbos, of Chanukah to daven for tefillos. So therefore, every tefillah should have in it the Al Hanisim. Does it remain 2 distinct entities, or does it become one entity? There's so many different ways of chopping the two-sided inquiry. And here again, we have an argument, but here many more people are involved. Listen to this. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, the Omri Tarvayu, that it's taken not mentioned. On the other hand, Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan, the Omri Tarvayu, that yes, maskid, it is mentioned. By the way, the halacha is like this latter opinion. We mention Al Hanisim in Musaf. Now, Amar Abaye Rabbi Yosef, that Hod Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, the first 2 opinions, Einoi maskir. I'm going to add something even better to give them more koyach. The Rafu. This is consistent with the opinion of Rav, which bears a lot of weight. As does, what does Rav Yechanan hold? Now, by the way, Rav Yechanan is on the other side. And we also have this Kloli Hashash Shlema, Rav and Rav Yechanan. Don't forget, Rav Yechanan was the head of the Amoraim in the Holy Land. Rav was the head of Bavel. So we take a paskan like Rav Yechanan, but this is a big statement. No, it didn't begin with Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, which were both Talmidei de Rav. It's consistent with Rav himself. Now we have to find, where do we find that Rav opined regarding this? We're not going to chop it so quick. So, Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav, Rosh Chodesh Chaliyas b'Shabbos. People are all familiar with this. Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbos. Hamafter menavi b'Shabbos. Whoever gets mafter, We make brachas after the reading of the Haftarah. Einoi tzorich lahaskir shel Rosh Chodesh. The final, right, post Haftarah bracha. How does it conclude? You remember? On Yom Tov, what do we say? We say Mekadosh Yisrael v'Azmanim at the end of saying the Haftarah. On Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, we don't do so. We only end Mekadosh Shabbos. Why? Because Rosh Chodesh doesn't demand saying Haftarah. We don't say Haftarah because of Rosh Chodesh. It's a very good comparison, at least at first, and we're going to refute it. Shilmole Shabbos, if not for the fact that it's Shabbos, ein Navi b'Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, it's only logical that even though you are saying it on Rosh Chodesh, you don't need to mention Rosh Chodesh. So the same thing is over here. Chanukah doesn't demand Musaf. You're saying Musaf because it's Shabbos. You're saying Musaf because of Rosh Chodesh, nothing to do with Chanukah. So therefore, you shouldn't say Alanis. And L'choira, that's the Rav that will be the backup to Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. Counters the Gemara. Well, I like what Rav is saying, but you cannot compare these two cases. Midami over there, Hassam Navi bid Rosh Chodesh. Never. We never read Haftarah on Rosh Chodesh. There is never a Rosh Chodesh that demands the Haftarah ever. Klal, like a klal. But over here, Chanukah demands Alanism. I know that Chanukah doesn't demand Musaf, but Chanukah demands Alanism. That's a big difference. Hachi Isay, and you say during Ma'ariv, and you say during Shachris, and you say during Mincha. Again, Masha'en Ken Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh. Nowhere in Rosh Chodesh are you going to mention any Haftarah. However, you're right that they sided with Rav, but it's another Rav. Okay, so that's another Shlomo is just bringing up. We don't say Yalav Yavai because the whole Musaf is Rosh Chodesh. I want to make it. No, it's like we don't say Yalav Yavai when you're davening. Okay, but that's different because Yalav Yavai is a haskara of Yom Tov. The ganze davening is speaking with more pratim about it. Elo lo hadamya. You're right, it is Rav, but to what? Another statement. The Omar Rav Achadvoy. In the name of Rav Masna, in the name of Rav, Yom Tov Shechaliyas B'Shabbos. Now, guys, buckle your seatbelts. You're going to read something that you probably never heard prior to last cycle when you learned Shabbos Chav Daled. Do you know, according to Rashi, that there used to be a minhag every Shabbos afternoon to read 10 psukim from Navi? So he says that Yom Tov Shechaliyas B'Shabbos, and therefore you're reading Mafter. They would know it's aside of the Kriyas HaTorah that we do. That's way older. That's we know Ezra. One of the takanas of Ezra is to read from the Torah. Aside of that, there was a minhag to read from the Mafter. And there, Rav says, HaMafter b'Navi b'Mincha b'Shabbos ein tzarich lahaskir shel Yom Tov. He concludes only with Mekadosh Shabbos. Now, guys, I want to say like this: Shabbos Shach. When we daven, the Kriyas HaTorah that's in between Shachris and Musaf on Shabbos Yom Tov, we conclude not only with Shabbos, Mekadosh Shabbos Yisrael v'Azmanim. But still, since Mincha, there is never a reading of Navi on Yom Tov, even though it's Yom Tov, but it's only because of Shabbos. That's mamish like Chanukah. In Shachris, we're going to say Ala Nisim. In Shachris, you're going to make mention of Yom Tov in the bracha of the Haftarah. But since Shabbos has an afternoon reading, Yom Tov never has an afternoon reading. She'ilmale Shabbos ein Navi b'Mincha b'Yom Tov. Now let's read inside Rashi 8 lines from the bottom, because people read this, they don't know, right? We are Baruch Hashem, we are observant Yidden. Who has such a thing? So says Rashi that I found b'tshuvas hagoinim. Shehoyu regilam likros b'navi b'shabbosos b'mincha asara psukim and ubiyemei parsiim. During the times of the Persians, gozru gezeira shalei lasois, and after the Persians stopped that minhag, it was a minhag, hoyu regilim, so they never picked it up again. The kivan shenestalko nestalko. Azoy zot Rashi. Tosfos has a big problem with that. And Tosfos writes the second to last line, Uvetiras Rabbeinu Tam, it's not like Rashi. Because when Rashi says that the psukim was Regilam Likrois, B'Navi, there is a big difference between reading verses from the Nevi'im. Our Shabbos day, Yom Tov day, Haftarah is dafke benavi. I don't know if you noticed that. We don't read ksuvim. There in Mincha, they dafke read ksuvim. Okay. And we'll leave it at that. So there's a machlekes what the minig used to be, and this is a great proof. Now, verstehst the Haftorah that's read Shabbos, that's Yom Tov, b'mincha is perfectly analogous, if that's the word, with our topic. Turning to Daf Chav Daled Amud Beis. So now we have Rav, but we have much more than Rav. So now we have Rav Huna, Hals Kop Chevra, we have Rav Yehuda. You can argue we have Rav Gidel. It's not exactly the same, but we have now Rav Achadvoi. So you would argue, so many opinions on that side. Einoi Maskir says the Gemara, but we don't follow all of these teachings. We do say Musaf. We do say Alanisim and Musaf. Why? Elo kiha the Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. As was Yoi Makipurim Shechalias b'Shabbos. Guys, how many tefillas do we daven on Shabbos? Shabbos never comes with an Ne'ilah. Never. There's 4 tefillas because you have Musaf. Shabbos, Yom Kippur. Another example. You daven Ne'ilah only because it's Yom Kippur. So I want to know, do you make a mention of Shabbos in Ne'ilah? Same type of question. In the morning, you make mention of Shabbos. Like in the Shachris, you're going to say Alanisim. This is the one tefillah that is not connected at all to Shabbos. So Rabbi ben Levi says, Sorech lahasker shel Shabbos. And the Nusach Rashi brings 3 lines from the top is that we say, Vatitan lanu es yoim hamonoyach. That's that Nusach. That means Shabbos. And the es yoim ha-kippurim hazeh. And furthermore, when you finish the bracha, you're not chosim only regarding Yom Kippur, but chosim mekadesh ha-Shabbos v'yoim ha-kippurim. And like Rashi, v'afal pisha ain't feeling ilu b'Shabbos. This is another great analogy to our topic. And why do we do so? These are the words of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Because Yom Hu shenas chai ba'arba tefillas. By the way, guys, Yom Kippur, we daven 5 tefillas. Yom means the daytime. During the daytime, there are 4 tefillas. So since it becomes a Yom Kippur dika, Shabbos dika, it's together. So you have to mention both. So therefore, you're right. Chanukah doesn't have Musaf, but when you're davening Musaf on Chanukah, because it's Shabbos, because it's Rosh Chodesh, yes, you have to make mention of the Al Hanisim. All based because of the weight that we give to Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Now, the final will be amazing. Azoi, you're siding with Rabbi Shua ben Levi. I have a contradiction now. Now I have a problem. Why? Because Amrat, you just went ahead and you have all these opinions, Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda and Rav Gidon and Rav Achadvoi. We're siding with the other, Rav Nachman, Rav Yechanan, not only because of Rav Yechanan, because of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi, I have a problem. We also know, and no one debates this din, that we paskin like Rava. What Rava? Which Rava? Says the Gemara. The Amar Rava, Yom Tov Shchalias b'Shabbos. What do we do unique, my friends, Friday night? What's unique Friday night is that there is a abridged repetition of the Shemona Esrei. It's not the full-fledged Chazar Hashatz, but the bracha that the Baal Tefillah makes, Magen Avos, Elokeinu Elokei Aviseinu, Kaddish, Tiskabel Tzoloison, it's an abbreviated, it's called an abridged repetition. What do we do? What do we do? Shabbos, don't look inside. How do we finish that bracha? Do we say, Mekadosh HaShabbos Yisrael V'Azmanim? Or, even though we say it because it's Shabbos, but we only say Mekadosh HaShabbos? Same type of question. And Rava says, and we paskin like Rava, that we only mention Shabbos. Yom Tishchalias b'Shabbos, Shliach Tzibur, Hayoyed Lifnei Atera Arves. We're speaking not about what we call today the Chazan. No, we're speaking about the repetition of Maidav, the abridged repetition. Paskins Rava Eino Tzorach Lahasker Shel Yom Tov at all. Indeed, all you do is Mekadosh HaShabbos. And why, says Rava, She'il Molei Shabbos, without Shabbos, if not for Shabbos, Ein Shliach Tzibur Yored Arvis B'Yom Tov. This mamish is a contradiction. But let's not even focus on Chanukah, because Chanukah is the student. The teacher is Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi is speaking about Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah. Same thing. There's never Ne'ilah on Shabbos. So how can you paskin that by Shabbos Ne'ilah you do say Yom HaManoyach and Yom Kippurim? You're choisem B'Kadosh HaShabbos and Yom Kippur. And why not Friday night Yom Tiv? That's a great contradiction. And here the Gemara says, Hachi Hashta, you can't compare one to the other. In English, apples and oranges. Chosam over there. B'dinu dafilu b'Shabbos nami l'tzarach. This is the key. Really, on Shabbos, you should not have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. You know why you don't repeat the Shemona Esrei at night? B'chlal, why don't you repeat the Shemona Esrei at night? If you remember, Masechta Brachos, that was the big machloikas that led to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's ascent, so to say, to the head of the academy. Whether are you mechuyev to daven ma'ariv, or is it only at a shus? Is it optional? Now we learned the Tosfos and Shabbos. Now that we took it upon ourselves to daven ma'ariv, don't think that it's a zoy optional, but still it's not on the level of Shachris and Mincha. And that was the whole sugya we had in Brachas. What's the origin of the Shemona Esreis? We had two major opinions. Either it is Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and then what difference will there be? Yaakov is a father of the Jewish people like Yitzchak and like Avraham. The other source of the tefillas is because of Makim Korbanos. Korbanos are only brought during the day. Tamid and Tamid. Based on that, Ma'ariv are not on the same level. So very good. Ma'ariv is Rishus. Because of that, you're not mechuyev to make a repetition. We make a repetition for a side reason. And we learned this. What's the side reason? Because of the danger. What's the danger, guys? Most of the shuls, or many of the shuls then, were not in the cities. Real estate was expensive, or whatever the logic was, it was outside the city. And you should know that it wasn't that common for people to go to shul at night. People would go to shul during day. When did people go to shul at night? Shabbos. Here the problem is that some people at night, on Shabbos, they come to shul late. And if you would not make some sort of extension after the Shemona Esrei to keep everyone else who came on time in shul longer, then most people would leave. And the latecomers, they wouldn't daven quicker. They would daven they would leave later and they would have to walk home alone. And that's the danger. It's just amazing that when you think about how long is the abridged version of the repetition, not that big. Even with a tremendous chazan, 5 minutes. He'll sing all negunim, 10 minutes. Yeah, sometimes that makes all the difference. That makes all people get into trouble because they couldn't wait a few minutes and they walked along by themselves. No, since there's really no chiyuv, it's only because of sakana. That's different. Aval hachi over here. No, you're chayiv to daven ne'ilah. I know you're chayiv because of Yom Kippur. You're not chayiv but it's a chiyuv. So now that you're chayiv, we say yoy mushin is chayiv arba tefillah. Beautiful difference. And therefore, yes, we paskin like Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and you v'choisem a kaddish haShabbos v'yom Kippurim. Okay, going back to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Amud Beis, when we are going through all of the wicks and the fuels that are or that are not valid for Neiros Shabbos. We just finished the Chanukah, so we're going back to Shabbos. So the Mishnah wrote towards the end that V'loi ba'aliyah. Aliyah is the tail of a shepsel. It's fat, not with other parts of animal fats. That's the Tanakama. Nachum Hamadai says that if you have fats that were boiled, they already are better. And the Chachamim say no. Echad mabushel ve'echad she'en mabushel ei madlikim boi. And the question is, doesn't it sound like the Chachamim and the Tanakama are saying the same thing? Like, who needs that? We already said you can't use. There's a machloikas. So why repeat it? Answers the Gemara, no, they're not saying the same thing. Now, what's going to be interesting is that we're going to have a statement here. We're going to have a statement on Daf Chavav Amud Beis, all based on that which we learned. All based on that which we learned. Rav Bruna Omar Rav Bruna Omar Rav Chever was on Daf Chaf Aleph. What was the topic over there? Topic over there was like this. If you have an invalid fuel, listen to the nature of how Hashem made the world. Fuel means fuel that doesn't go into the wick well. If you add only a little bit of good fuel, the good fuel, it's like a good chassid, influences all of the bad fuel. Now, Could you use it or not? So why not? Because maybe someone will forget to add the good fuel. So the lenient opinion was that Rav Bruna Amarav, that he does allow to pour a little bit of valid, but he only mentioned shleimah, not into chaylev, into melted chaylev. This topic, chaylev cannot be used. Melted chaylev, that was like zeta ligzeta. Melted chaylev, he says you could put a little bit of good fuel. Not everyone agrees with him. So the reason why the Mishnah has the Tanakama and then the Chachamim is because they are arguing whether you are allowed to add a little bit of good fuel in the cooked chaylev. Now, the only thing is, okay, who holds what? Who holds what? The Gemara says, "V'loi mesaimei." We remember that was the answer. We cannot figure out from reading the words of the Tanakama and reading the words of the Chachamim. We don't know which one sides which with, but they don't have the same opinion. Their argument is, again, whether you are allowed to add a little bit of good oil, a little bit, in the cooked oil, since there is a machlekes, whether or not. So the Mishnah recorded both opinions, in spite of the fact, again, that we don't know which way this goes. Chava will stop over here, God willing, to be continued. Okay, so what we're doing now is as we're making up the daf, and we're going to go now to daf Chavav. Again, we're going to have a relatively short daf. I'm going to announce, this is only going to go on for another few days, the back and forth. If there's a needed introduction, we'll give it on the Zoom, not on the video for Chabad.org. But here, it's no groise introduction is needed because we are continuing to learn about invalid fuels. It's a very easy sugya. Okay, let's start. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Chav Vav. We're going to start on Daf Chav Vav Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the top of the Amud. We are continuing to learn about other invalid fuels other than the ones that are mentioned in the Mishnah in the beginning of the Perek. The last fuel that the Gemara speaks about is about balsam or balsam oil. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And as we learned before, there's 2 issues with balsam oil, why we may not use it for Neder Shabbos. Number one, there's a concept called chamira sakanta meisura, that we give more weight to danger than to halacha. Not, God forbid, because we're not taking halacha into account, because a life you cannot bring back. And almost all of the mitzvahs, if you have to choose between life, you have to pick the life. And the tragic story that we just read, how a young woman, she was filled with balsam oil, is very flammable, and the fire can jump. So number one, we're not allowed to light Neder Shabbos with balsam oil because it's dangerous. You're involved, you made it, you poured it, you can get burnt. And number two, it has a good fragrance. So you're going to say, so what's the big deal? No, it's a big deal because that was the Rashi we had on Daf Chafei, Amid Beis on the bottom. Just like everyone is familiar that we are not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos. And because of that, what happens if you have a lamp and you add oil on Shabbos? Rashi says you're chayiv of making fire. Even though the fire is lit, you're just adding oil. That's Rashi. So therefore, if you remove oil, you are chayiv biblically for extinguishing a fire, machabe. The oil is so gishmak that you might end up taking some of it without knowing that even though you're not putting the fire out, but you're causing the fire to go out. And again, it's only indirect. And that was the Rashi that we have in the end of the Chafei base. So that was the topic that we're learning about. So we're going to learn more about invalid fuels. We're going to actually start speaking a little bit more about the uniqueness about balsam oil. And then we're going to go me'inyan le'in. We'll see how. And we're going to start many dafim of Tuman Tara concerning the following. For something to be susceptible to becoming tamei, it has to be a keli. It has to be a finished product. If it's a garment, it has to be halachically defined as a garment. Now, of course, a garment is a garment. We are speaking now about pieces of material that are relatively small. They could be made into a garment for a baby. They could be made as to a patch. Some materials are not going to be used for wealthy people. Only poor people will use them as a patch. And basically, this is the big topic of, there's a machloikas. There's a difference, that will be the key, between Semer upishtin, which the Torah specifies between wool and linen, it's considered something more chashuv. There, even if you have a material only in the size of shalosh al shalosh, you have to remember, I'm talking to myself, shalosh without the hay means finger breadths. Another detail, finger breadths in halacha always refers to the thumb. So shalosh al shalosh, or bigger, if that patch is made out of wool or linen, is considered a beged, and therefore it's susceptible to becoming tamei. Kevin has a great picture. Then there is another step called shloisha al shloisha. With a hay, it's tfachim. And we will see a big machloikas Abaya and Rava. We're going to learn today Abaya. The next step will be Shitas Rava. Whether do we, Abaya holds other materials, just a piece of, even if it's shloisha al shloisha, is not halachically called a beged. You know, the Torah uses the words beged in many different areas, but in the context of tzoras, the Torah specifies beged semer, beged pishtim, and that will become a binyan of that whenever the Torah says the words beged in all the other areas, it means semer or pishtim. And by the way, we're not going to learn about it today, but in the Nachas and the Sugi of Tzitzis, that's the big question. When you make a bona fide beged, dalet kanfis, are you biblically mechuyev to put on tzitzis? And for example, the Rambam says the only beged upon which you are biblically obligated to put tzitzis, semer or pishtim. Even though we know that on pishtim we don't put tzitzis because they used to have tchelis. Many people go back to the tchelis, and tchelis can only be on wool. And even though that when you're doing the mitzvah, that's the sugi in Yavamas, that's only when you're doing the mitzvah. What happens if you're wearing it at night? So if it's made out of shatnez, when it's no mitzvah, you'll be violating. That's different topics. We don't paskin like the Rambam, but that's why many people are mahadid and they have the talos cotton made out of wool. What's linen, you don't wear rabbinically. According to the Rambam, the only beged that you're fulfilling the mitzvah midoi raisa of putting on dalet kanfis is wool. All this is all connected to our. This is going to be basically the topic that we will begin with. That will be the main nekuda. Semeru pishtim, even only shalosh al shalosh. Other begadim, either shloisha al shloisha, ooh, that's already chashiv, or not even that. Not even that. Okay, let's start. Again, on Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the top of the Amid. So as we just finished learning the tragic story, or let me word it in the positive, of the importance of for the mother-in-laws to be good mother-in-laws, that's in the positive. So let's speak a little bit more about this balsam oil. So we have a pasuk in Yirmiyah, and it says this pasuk is how this Nebuchadnezzar had with him, who we called Nebuzaradan, the chief butcher. He was probably the greatest murderer, biyadayim, of the whole history. We have the Gemara in Gittin, how many people he killed over the bloods of Zechariah, terrible stories. So he left a few Yidden in Yerushalayim selfishly. So it says over there that Umidaloi Sa'aretz Yeshir, that from the poor people of the land he left. Who left? Nebuzaradan, Rabat Tabachim, Nebuzaradan, who we call the chief executioner, the chief murderer. But why did he leave them? To be the Karmim and to be the Yoigvim. Now, Chevra, I want you to know that the Pshat, we know Kerem, we're familiar. And Yegev, these words are normally used in the context of gathering grapes, pressing grapes. Didn't make sense. He wanted to get all the Yidden out of Eretz Yisrael. Why would he leave even poor Yidden that would never raise their heads against the Babylonian government for something that you can wind they had in Bavel? They didn't need it. That's why the Gemara is going to make a drasha that there were certain products that are only made in Israel, and the locals know how to do it. So for that, only for that reason, and he wanted the Babylonian government to have those products. One of them will be balsam oil. That's unique of the Holy Land. So cardamom, what's the cardamom? Get the pshat of cardamom means kerem. Says Gemara, no. Tani Rabbi Yosef, elu melakte afarsamoin. These are the ones who gathered the afarsamoin from the balsam, and which primarily grows in the region called En Gedi, all the way to Ramasa. And you know, when you live locally, you know how to do it better. So that's why he left them there. And Yoigvim, guys, normally Yoigvim is grape pressers. That's normally the interpretation. Here, again, the Rem is, what is unique to the Holy Land? The big, what is the chalozin? But chalozin was something that we, the Yidden, we knew what they are, and we knew how to capture them, and you have to know how to make dye out of them. And they were primarily caught from the area that we call Sulamois Shaltsoir, from the heights of Tzoir, of Tyre, all the way down to Haifa. So again, he's just pointing out anything that's unique to Eretz Yisrael, it's a given, is something special. That balsam oil is... So it's fakir. So he had no option other than to leave Yidden in the Holy Land for them to continue to manufacture these products. Now he left the Midalos. He left the poor Yidden. He didn't want to have any rebellion against them. You know, when you put people into Golos, you take away their power. When you are local, that's what Sanchedav did. He exiled the Roiv of every country, so he made an internal machloikas, so that's how he remained the king. Okay, back to other items that we may not use for hadlokos, neiros, Shabbos, kodesh. Ein madlikin, says the Braisa, betevel. Tevel is produce. Now we're speaking about oil. We're speaking about items that are flammable. We're not speaking about we're speaking about any product that otherwise would have been great fuel. Tevel it wasn't yet tithed. Now, even though it's going to go to the Kohen, it's going to go to the Levi, a Kohen cannot eat tevel. Do we look at it as chulin and truma mixed together? Do we look at it as a separate category? Not negayim. So says the Braisa that even the way Rashi says, even tevel that's tamei. Rashi writes, kol shchein b'tohar, says Rashi, you may not use to b'choil. You can't use it for choil. Choil means b'chlal. In other words, you can't use tevel. If you want to light your light, and if ain't tzarich you can't use it on Shabbos Kodesh. Kayoytze, says the Braisa, ein madlikin beneft lavan, white nafta, cannot be used during the weekday. B'chlal, as we'll see here again, like the balsam oil, it's very flammable and it's very volatile. It means it jumps. And therefore, there's a sakana. And if you want to know what nafta is, you take a look over here on the Zoom, or you go Google, Rabbi Google. Now, end of quote, says, think about it. I understand why we should never use it, because, it can set your house on fire. Aside of that, just to know why because it has a bad odor. And you know what people do now? During the week, what do you do if there's a bad odor coming from the oil? You put it out. Shabbos, no one is going to put it out. You know what you're going to do? You're going to move to another room. But that was the whole point that we learned about, whether it's Oinik Shabbos, all these nuances. You should eat the meal in light. You can make nice lights, but it cannot be in the dark. So that's why, for sure, not on Shabbos. Abel tevel tamei. Why can you not use it? Tevel tamei. You're burning it. What's wrong with it? You should know, Chavra, that kachim, that's tamei, is asur bahana. Right? Truma, that's tamei. We have to remember these rules. Truma that's tamei, even though a kohen may not eat it, lechatchila, he can derive benefit from it. So what's the source that tevel tamei is something that is asur bahana, based on a pasuk in Kodesh? After the rebellion, the Torah reiterated many, but we have the total of the chav dalid matnois kuhana. So the Torah gives an intro over there in Kodesh. Va'ani, this is God Almighty. Hineni nosati locha. Locha means surah kahanim es mishmeres tirumoisoi. I have given to you the safeguard, guys, not to my truma in the singular, trumoisoi, however you pronounce your ivra, mitayur at the end, it's my trumais in the plural. So the Torah is speaking about two trumais, say Chazal. What is God Almighty referring to? God gave the Kaihanim both Truma Torah and Truma Tameya, like we mentioned, unlike Kachim Tamei, which is Asur Bahana. Truma Tameya, which may not be consumed, Iro, but you can derive benefit from it. Including if you have oil, you can use it for fuel. But the fact that they are juxtaposed one to the other, so we say the following: just like Truma Tohira Ein Lachaba Ela Mishas Harama Ve'elach, like we mentioned, a kohen cannot say, "Let me eat tevel," because the most important part of the separation is the Truma Gedoyla. Anyways, I'm a kohen. Can't do that. If a person eats tevel, even a kohen, just to see the severity of it, chayiv misidei shamayim. So God gave him Truma Torah only Mishas Afrasha Ve'elach, Af Truma Tameya. Yes, you can use it for fuel, Lechatchila, but you know from when? Ein Lechaba, Ela Mishas Arama Ve'elach. And before you separated the tithings, in other words, when it's called Tevel has to be tithed. Tevel has to be tithed. So then you have, from the outset, you have Truma Tameya. What can you do? But no one can derive benefit from the fuel. It's Asur Ba'ana. Okay. Gufa, this is going back to Daf Chafei Amud Beis. Guys, we're speaking about all different types of fuels. Now let's go back to this balsam oil. Rab Shimon ben Elazar Omer, ein madlikin b'tzadi. We're not allowed to light Shabbos candles with balsam oil. Again, what were the two reasons? Number one, that should come first. That was the top of the Amid, because it's off, because it's very volatile. It's dangerous. Number two, because taket smells so good. Sometimes things that are too good is not good. You're going to like it so much, you're going to take some of the oil out of the lamp. And that's machabe. So now, he's going to give a third reason. Everyone is agreeing that you may not use balsam oil, but what's the third reason? Since balsam comes from the sap of balsam trees, here we go. In other words, it's not juice. It's sap. You know what sap is similar to? We had in the beginning of the Perek, pitch. Pitch cannot be used because it's not drawn easily into the wick. Anything that's coming out of an eitz, unlike a pri, like oil that comes from a pri, doesn't go good into the wick. So that's a third reason. Everyone is agreeing that's another time. That is why he's saying it's only me'atzei haktov, and anything that comes from eitzim is not good for Shabbos candles. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, kol hayotzim in ha'eitzim adlikim bay. He's taking it further. And that's not only balsam. Any sap, any material that is a product of eitz, we call that sap. No, it's not coming out of the fruit from the tree. It's coming out of the tree, or it's coming out of the leaves. That's something that Bechal cannot be used. No. He's just broadening it because Rabbi Shmuel is Rabbi Shimon Elazar is focusing on sari. The Brisa is beginning about sari. He's broadening it. Okay, and Rabbi Shmuel ben Broika Omer. Tell you more than that. He's adding. It's not just, don't focus that which comes from the eitz is not good. It has to come from a pri. Now, what is he excluding? So Rashi reminds us. Rashi says, La fuke shemen dogim. Shemen dogim, many Rishonim say, means the innards of the fish. They're not good. Again, they're not good, meaning they're good fuel, but they don't go easily into the wick. The fire is going to flicker too much. Or itron and sari. Okay. Now, Rab Tarfon Omer, a madlik and elbashem and zayis bilvad. This is a very, very stringent opinion. We don't paskin like Rab Tarfon. He says you can only use olive oil when he's for Shabbos. So when he said that, Amad Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri Araglov. No, there's the normal argument in the Beis Medrash. Then you have when you made a statement and the oilam cannot tolerate it. So then they stand up. And V'amar, and he tells the Rabbi Tarfon, Azoi, you tell me, Mayasu Anshe Bavel. What should all of the Yidden do in Bavel? She'ein lahem elo shemen shum shemen. Maybe the big Gevidim, they have money to import it from Israel. The sesame seed oil, that's their oil. Umayasu Anshe Madai. She'ein lahem elo shemen agoizim. They have not oil. Umayasu Anshe Alexandria over there in Egypt. She'ein lahem elo shemen tsenoinois, have radish oil. Umayasu Anshe Kaputkia. She'ein lahem loikach v'loikach elo neft. Now guys, nafta lovan is what we mentioned before. Stam neft. So don't say that you can only use olive oil. Elo ein lecho elo mashu amru chachamim. This is so classic. We have a Mishnah. The Mishnah on Daf Chaf Amud Beis, the beginning of Perek Sheni. They already told you what you can't use. What do we do? From a Yidden, we constantly were more machmir. You can't do this, and also not this. At the end, only thing that was left was Shem and Zayis. So he says, you know what? Let's go back to what we have in the oral Torah. That which it says in the Mishnah, ein madlikin. That's it. And therefore, he's saying, umadlikin b'shemen dogin. You could use shemen dogin. Don't say only good element apri. You could use itron. Now, guys, itron, itron, if you have a picture, it comes from pitch. Pitch, the Mishnah says you can't use. But itron is good. It goes better. It feeds the wicks better. Shemen shuzuri yomer. Madlik and b'shaman pekuais. Now pekuais is some sort of fruit or plant that is similar to, it's in the gourd family. If I'm pronouncing it correctly in English, it's called kolaknith. I'm happy Danny Fishman is not here. He would be shouting. And it's similar to a watermelon. You have all different. Let's see if Kevin can find a picture. Good luck to you. Ubeneft. You could. Sumcha says like this: anything that is extracted from flesh, ein madlikin boy. The only exception to that is shemen dogim. Problem is, Sumchas and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is the Tanakama, is saying the same exact thing. All right, Rashi says, Sumchas hainu Tanakama. Tanakama means Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that everyone agrees. Whatever the Mishnah says you can't use, including Calif. Calif is included. Calif is Yotzim and Abasa. And the only, which cannot be used, the only product that comes out of flesh that could be used is shemen dagim. So here again, we had this at the end of Daf Chavdalud Amud Beis. The nafkamina will be if you have a material that is in itself not good, but if you add a little bit of good oil has this nature that it elevates all of the oils. Do you make a gzeira or not? So that was discussed on Daf Chafal of Amud Aleph. Who quoted this? Rav Beroina Amarav. So the nafkamina between Sumchas and the Tanakama, which is Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, will be one agrees, one doesn't agree. But here again, the Gemara says, we don't know how to figure out from the words of the Braisa which one takes which opinion, mamish to what we had on Daf Chavdalud Amud Beis. Okay, so now because of the mention of Kol Hayotzim Min Ha'etz, that Kol Hayotzim Min Ha'etz, when it comes to Neder Shabbos Kodesh, is not qualified. Who said that? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. We're going to now make a link. Another statement of the same Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar concerning products that come from Eitz, Tuman Tara. And that's going to go for a couple of daf, the amazing Tuman Tara sugyas that we have, not enough, but at least that's chaparain as much as we could. Says the Beraisa. I have 3 lines for the bottom of the Amid. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Kol hayotzim min ha'etz. Eitz means, by the eitz doesn't only mean a tree, it means a plant. Any product that comes from a plant from which you make material. Last line in the Amid, ein boy mishum shalosh al shalosh. When we spoke out on the intro, that if you have a cloth that's made from fibers, either of wool or of linen, not God forbid together, one or the other, even if the size of the cloth is only shalosh, without his finger breadths, it's considered chashuv enough, it's a beged, l'may nafkamina, that it's susceptible to becoming tamei. Whenever you're going to read the word tamei, never think it's tamei. It means it's susceptible. You have to know many dinim. You have to have some source of tumah. You have to know what halachic contact means. It doesn't only have to be touch. You can have tumas oil. You can have hesed, but it has to be susceptible to becoming tamei. The dinim of shalosh al shalosh is kol hayotzei ein by mishum shalosh al shalosh. Now, guys, 1 second. Flax is the exception. Yachapt wool. I get wool is something b'chlal. Otherwise, comes from an animal. Pishtan is called hayotzim min ha'etz. And eitz doesn't mean only a tree. Pishtan is a plant, the flax plant. So aside of that, it's not susceptible to it. And therefore, let's jump a moment to Hilchos Sukkah u'mesachechem boy, because the basic prerequisites that the Mishnah writes regarding kosher schak, it has to be something that's gidulei karka, not animal, but and now it has to be disconnected from the karka. But if it's now so readied that it's considered a product that could become tamei, also it's not valid for schar. So therefore, since a product that yotzim min ha'etz, even if it has shalosh al shalosh, is not makabel tuma, it's perfect. That's perfect schar. Well, therefore umesachin boy. And what's the big exception? Pishtan. Pishtan, shalosh al shalosh is makabel tuma, and therefore, even though it's a product gedulei karka, even though now it's not connected to the karka, since it's makabel tuma, therefore you cannot make schach out of shtikalach of shalosh al shalosh or bigger from pishtan. Okay, now like we mentioned, the big question, Abaye Rav, this is a very important topic, is regarding the other begad, the other materials that from which you make other begad. Amar Abaye, Daf Chav Vav Amud Beis. Now you should know, our Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the statement that we just made, and the Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, Amru Davar Echad, they are of the same opinion. Rashi, Tap Rashi, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, Amru Davar Echad, the Mehecha Teisa le Rabbi Shimon. Where did Rabbi Shimon learn Lema'ute Shar Begadim Mituma? How did he get that? Pishtan, he's moida. Flax, shalosh al shalosh, is considered a patch of beged enough that it's called halachically a beged, including ledinem tumentara. How did he know that that's only for? Where did he get it from? It must have been because of that which Rabbi Shmuel, Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. He loved the Eastlay, the Tana Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, and Oy Bazoi, Rashi adds a very important nuance that, as we'll learn in a moment, Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel isn't only speaking about other items that come min ha'etz. He only mentioned that because he was speaking about what's good for schach or nach. Schach has to come from geduli karka. As we learn in Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, he's speaking about polyester. I know there was no polyester then, but he's speaking about any begodim. His emphasis will be that how biblically beged means either tzemer or pishtan. Okay, let's go inside. So Rab Shimon Elazar Hadamaran. Third line from the top. What's the Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel? Mahi, the Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. Hoyel v'nemru begodim b'toyra stam. Chevre, in Tumas Shiratzim, the Torah uses the words beged. When it comes to Tumas Meis, the Torah uses the words beged. When it comes to Shichva Zera over there in Mitzoira, the Torah uses the words beged. When it comes to Tzitzis, the Torah says Al Kanfei Bigdeim. When it comes to Tumas Tzora'as, because the three is person, home, Bigodim. In the wrong order, I just want to leave Bigodim for the end. So there are many different areas in the Torah where the word beged is mentioned. So says the Brais of Rabbi Yishmael that Sosam, 1 second, Torah Yishmael, Neru begodim b'Torah stam. In other words, the Torah never clarified what fibers, what materials are needed for you to consider it biblically a garment. However, in one of the cases that we just mentioned, which is in Tumas Negoyim, Parat L'cha Kosuv Be'echad Mehem, and the Torah there specified Semeru Pishtim. And another important klal that we say every morning in the Yud Gimel Midos, that actually the Torah first used the words beged in Tumas Negoyim, right? Vahabeged, the Torah says, Kiye boy negat soras, that's called a klal, right? Vahabeged. And then the Torah says, Beged semer, beged pishtim. That's your classic klal uprat, not klal uprat klal. And therefore, what's the rule? Ein locha ela masha beprat. So by Negoyim, no one debates that. By Negoyim, the way the Torah formulated the dinim of beged, it's clear there only if the beged is made out of either tzemer or pishtim is it susceptible to the parsha of Tumas Negoyim. So Malhal and Temer Pishtin says the Torah Rabbi Shmuel, now what we call now a binyan av, in every item that we mentioned, Tumas Shiratzim, Tumas Meitz, Shichva Zera, when it comes to tzitzis, the Torah uses the words beged, af, koil, only semer upishtim. Now, in the context of Tuma, guys, in the context of Tuma, it's what type of beged? The Torah says, oy beged, oy sak, all these, what beged is susceptible? Only semer upishtim. Now, there's a big statement, because when Abaye is making this link, what Abaye is also saying by that if it's not semer upishtim, it's not shayach at all, biblically, to Tuma. Okay. Rava says, well, hold on. Not so quick. If you have a beged that's larger than our topic, we're going back to Rab Shimon ben Elazar. When it comes to 3 on 3 finger breadths, which is much smaller, I agree with that. But don't end your statement by saying that if it's not Samar Pishtim, it's not susceptible biblically. Rava says no. If it's Shloi Shah, that's with the hay. Al Shloi Shah. Then I'm not going to say that Rab Shimon ben Elazar will agree with Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. They won't have the same opinion. Ike benayu, meaning that Rab Shimon ben Elazar, how do you know that he only spoke about shalosh al shalosh? Why did he only speak about shalosh al shalosh? I'll tell you why. Because according to the Tana of Rab Shimon ben Elazar, you're right. Any other fiber other than Samar Pishtim, if you only have Shalosh al Shalosh, up until Shloi Shah, Taka nothing to talk about. But once you hit Shloi Shah al Shloi Shah, that's going to be considered a beged. No one is done, guys. We just read a Brais of Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. Rav is not arguing with anything. What he's saying is that Rav Shimon ben Elazar doesn't agree with that. But Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, Taka Leislei. Abaya doesn't make that difference. Abaya puts them together because Abaya. Shar begodim, other fibers, even shloisha al shloisha, biblically are not makabel tumah. Okay, Says the Gemara, look, it's the Kul Alma Miyas. According to everyone, it's clear that Shalosh al Shalosh only Bitsemeru Pishtam Adam and Goyim Minolon. That's a big question. No, I guys, take a seat back. Yeah, we just said the Rashi, Klalo Prat. I know that. The Torah never spoke about Shalosh. The Torah never spoke about Shloisha. How do you get that? Where do you get that from? Now, it's a given that Shloisha is considered something that's usable. You can make a little, I don't know, maybe a little 3 tfachim. It's like you can make a glove, you can make a little hat. It's shayach. 3 by 3s, what are you going to make out of 3 finger breadths? It's like a patch. So how do you know that? And the answer is the Tanya. It says in a Braiso, and this is a pasuk from the Tumas Negoyim. The Torah says, the Torah really says ve'habeged. But before we add the letters that are extra, the word beged, only yellow beged, a proper beged, a bona fide beged. But this is the Braisa. What happens if you have a piece of a cloth that's only the size of 3 on 3 minayin? That's also included in Tumas Soras. Says the Braisa, the Torah adds the letters vav and hey, ve'habeged. Ve'habeged is a inclusive limud that you gotta get familiar with many Braisas to include even so shalosh al shalosh. Frek the Gemara, how do you know that? The Emel Rabbi shloish al shloisha. You just said beged means a beged. Beged is not about size. You know, people make a kinyan today with a gartel. What's the criticism? That the little gartelach that many people wear is not even 3 by 3. And the counter is, you're right, but it's a full beged. It's a full beged. So it's when we're speaking about sizes, when you don't have a beged, you have a cloth. Oh, so maybe it's Rabbi Shalosh al Shloisha. So the Gemara says no. For that you don't need veha beged. Why not? Because valav kavul chaymet. This is the answer. That I have a kavul chaymet. What's my kavul chaymet, guys? In the psukim there in Tumas Negoyim, you know what the Torah adds? That there are threads that are called shasi. Shasi threads are called in English warp. They are the threads that go to the length. Then you have other threads that go on the eidav. They're called the woof. They go on the width. Point is, the Torah says that threads, fibers that are ready to go into the garment, they are also susceptible to tumot soras. Now think about it. If you have threads that b'chlal are not made into anything yet, if they are susceptible, so shloisha al shloisha miboya. So it can't be that the extra words is to include something that we know from a Kavul Chaymet, but now the Gemara is the obvious question. Shalosh al shalosh is also more than threads. Why do you need to have the Vahabeged? Why do you need that Vav and the Hey? So the Gemara says, you're wrong. Big difference. Shloisha al shloisha. If you have a piece of cloth, for people in the shmata business, they love these sugyas. My father lived in this. 3 by 3, you can use it for everything. You're not going to use it only for a patch. See, a patch is something that poor people have to put a patch on the garment. Today, you'll never find a patch. Today, everyone is wealthy. Poor people need to put patch. So, shloish al shloisha, since the chazu bein lanim bein lashinim, which is what? Like threads. Threads are good for everyone. Therefore, that, you're right, is learned from the Kavul Chaymet. But once you have a woven piece of cloth that's only the size of shalosh al shalosh, not everyone will make use of it. Taka, threads have more value, raw material. Anyone in business, once you make a product, you almost ruin good raw material into a product if the product is not marketable. Shalosh al shalosh only la'anim u'dechazin, la'shinim le'chazin. In other words, it's less significant than threads of shasi and eidav. And therefore, you cannot learn it from the Kavul Chaymet. And that's why you need to have the Vav and the Hey. So, Tama the Kosvikra, Holy Kosvikra, Loy Gamrinan. We're going to have a little bit of a back and forth in this. Why don't we say that the Vav and the Hey is coming to include Shloisha al Shloisha, Bishar Begodim? How great is that? Which is really the machloikas that we're having over here between Abaye and Rava. So this now will be focusing on Abaye. Abaye holds that biblically, both of them, everyone holds Shar Begodim, and everyone, Rabbi Shmuel, even according to Rava, Shar Begodim is not included. Let's read inside the Rashi, 11 lines before the bottom. Why don't we say the Vav and the Hey is to include Shloisha? Guys, just remember, the Shloisha is with Tvachim, the bigger garment. In other words, V'shalosh shel shalosh b'tzemeru pishtim, Rashi is adding, the Gemara is not saying that it should not be included. That Havamin is based, let us still use the Kal V'Chomer. Even though we just explained that it's not such a good Kal V'Chomer, when the Gemara, the ones who asked in the yeshiva, let's use the Vav and the Hey, L'Rabbis 3 by 3 by other fibers, they're not negating this din that by Tzemer Upishtim, even Shalish al Shalish is Matama, but they're saying, no, let's use the Kal V'Chomer. So Shloisha and Shalish, Tzemer Upishtim is normally Kal V'Chomer. That's really the kasha. And let's use the Vav and the Hey, L'Rabbi Shar Begodim, Gavaldik. That's going to change everything, because if you have a allusion to Shar Begodim in Tumas Soras, which is like the prototype, then it's going to include all the then it's going to include Shar Begodim everywhere. So where it says it can be. Amar Kra answers the Gemara, since the Torah says Sem Beget Semer. Upishtim. What did we say before? Klal uprat, my friends. Klal uprat. Aim bechlal ella masha beprat. You can't include, when you have a klal, the Torah specifies beget semen and beget pishtim. Nothing will include anything that goes against the klal uprat.
So you can't use the Viha.
So the Viha, and it makes sense. So we go back. So it makes sense that the Kal V'Chomer wouldn't be good enough for the Shalish al Shalish. You need to have the Vav and Hey. Okay. No, beget semer upishtin in midachin aloy. Frag the Gemara ve'ema. Why don't we say that ki imayit? Why? You're right that the Torah was mafaret. What is the Torah mafaret shuki? Semer upishtim. But still, say that semer upishtim only ein locha ela masham is only regarding shalosh al shalosh. The Torah was never. We're only speaking about 3 and 3. The Torah is not speaking about 3 tfachim. Maybe by shloisha al shloisha, the Torah was not excluding that.
Even other, not just.
Shabigodim, Gavaldik. The Gemara says no, because it says beget semer, beget pishtim. The Torah uses the words beget twice. The Torah could have read beget semer upishtim. The Torah does write beget semer beget pishtim. You know why the Torah repeats the words beget twice? To be medayik, that our prat isn't only 3 by 3 finger breaths. Chad lemeute mishalish al shalish, v'chad lemeute mishloisha al shloisha. Very good. We're going to stop here. I just want to share a gavaldik concept that you should know, that what taka makes Tzemer Upishtim unique. Because we know up in Hasidus, we have this in Kabbalah, that semer, that linen is like the pure physical expression of midas hachesed. Kabbalah, and Pishtan is an expression of gevura. And this din that only a little bit is considered something chashuv is so emes. We're not talking about together. A bisel chesed. We know in our life, a little bit of chesed. How do you feel when someone does a little bit of chesed? And also in the reverse, that even when gevura is needed, I think they have the seichel, a little bit of gevura. When you need doicha, you know the Rebbe is small doicha, not yamin doicha. That's the power. A little bit of good, and not to be more gevuradik than a little bit. Chevra, a lot more to be continued. Like this, just to say like this, that the next daf will be Chavtes.
Well, why
Because when I was getting better from COVID, I gave a day, Danny gave a day. This is just another few days like this. So like this, we're going to start on Daf Chav Ches on the base, 5 lines from the bottom. And again, if I'll share on the Zoom an intro that's not needed for people that are learning it. Like the whole story with the mother-in-law was a terrible story with the mother-in-law, if you remember that. A mother-in-law didn't like her daughter-in-law, so she told her to be misasik in shemana, in balsam oil, and then she told the daughter-in-law to light, and she got burnt to death. Don't listen to your mother-in-law so quick. That was the takeaway. I don't know. That's a good fellow. No, 6 o'clock is fine. Fine. Just today, I didn't do Sunday, and these 2 dafim were little, because the other dafim we learned a lot more. So we're going to start on Chav Ches on the base, 5 lines for the bottom of the arm.
How many more days of makeup? And
no,
what
if
happens
I'm not
afterwards?
mistaken, that it's going to be for Shabbos this week and next week, and that's it. And
then Yevamos or
then Sanhedrin, only Sanhedrin.
Sanhedrin?